Have you ever wondered why we so rarely see smiles in old portraits? If you wander through an art gallery or museum, you're met with painted expressions of severity, seriousness, solemnity, and indifference, or at most, maybe a slight smirk. But big, toothy grins seem virtually non-existent, and the question is, why? Well, first we have to consider the rather basic fact that painting a portrait can take a long time. Unlike the momentary snap of the camera, sitting for a portrait can be a tedious process that can stretch anywhere from hours to weeks to sometimes even years. Portrait of Madame X, for example, took John Singer Sargent nearly 2 years to complete. Genuine smiles are reactionary and spontaneous, and very hard to superficially maintain for a long period of time without one starting to grimace. As a result, sitters and artists most likely agreed that a more composed, neutral expression was simply more practical and the better way to proceed. But practicality is not the sole reason for the lack of smiling faces in painted portraits. Think about it. For most of art history, formal portraits were status symbols. They were commissioned for a very specific purpose: to project and immortalize the sitter as a persona of power, wealth, authority, nobility, and legacy. So instead of smiles, we see expressions of seriousness and gravitas that make the sitter appear composed, intimidating, and powerful. Antonello da Messina, a 15th century Italian painter, sometimes painted sitters with subtle, closed-lipped smiles. He believed this could capture the inner soul of a person. But even these smiles are restrained and carefully balanced with the ideals of Renaissance humanism: composure, modesty, and harmony. It's also important to note that smiles meant different things in different eras. By the 13th century in medieval Europe, smiling and laughter were viewed with suspicion. Influenced by Christian teachings, laughter was often linked to folly, moral laxity, or even sin. During the Middle Ages, visible laughter or smiling was considered unrefined or even wicked. Publicly displaying joy was seen as a lack of self-restraint, and smiling too widely, especially with teeth, was interpreted as foolish or vulgar. Let's fast forward to the 17th century during the Dutch Golden Age. Here, we do see more expressive smiling faces, particularly in paintings of everyday life. Artists like Frans Hal, Jan Steen, Judith Leyster, and Gerrit van Honthorst painted scenes of merriment, music, and drinking. People in these works laugh, smile, and live loudly. But it's important to recognize that many of these paintings were moralizing, using smiles to signal excess, disorder, or moral weakness. They were meant to be lively and cautionary. It wasn't until photography became more widespread in the late 19th and early 20th centuries that smiles in portraiture became more normalized.